My good people, welcome back to the B.R.U.H Podcast. I know we've been out for a couple of months, but we've been here working, trying to make sure we can get y'all the content that y'all are looking for and need. We begin to expand the ministry of B.R.U.H, touching God's lives and pouring out into those lives and really providing a support system of accountability and Christian manhood. It's just a very healthy space. And so though we've been gone for a couple of months, we just want to make sure we've retooled and came back to you with some new and fresh things. So once again, this is Brothers Rising Uphill, the podcast for episode 2. So you think you're a man? 5 things God says about what it's like to be a man, or what a man should be. And with that being said, we got Corey Jones, the co-founder and president of Brothers Rising Uphill, and we got a new face with us today. Yep. My boy Neal Scott out of Atlanta. Neal, you want to tell the people a little bit about you before we go ahead and get and move into what we got to do?
Absolutely. What's up, bros? As Andre stated, my name is Neal Scott out of Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm a author, speaker, man of God. Most importantly, I'm in the health and wellness field. I've been owning my own business, B.R.U.H Total Wellness, for some years now. And right now, just to keep that short, I'm just walking in the light of God, here serving and just bringing y'all the good word. So I'm just excited to be here. Excited about this conversation we're about to have. Yeah. Let's get it popping, fellas. Get it popping.
Okay, so once again, welcome to the Brothers Rising Uphill podcast, where we talk Christian manhood, purity, and the intermingling of faith and pop culture. So let's get it rolling, man. So I know we got fellas out here and trying to grow into their manhood, and we got a lot of grown boys as well who might think they're men, but are not necessarily walking the way men should be, or they're trying to find their identities, or they're trying to figure out what manhood is. And that can be a very sticky thing because everyone's raised different. Some people didn't have a male in their life, a father figure in their life who birthed them, who not birthed them, but who was their biological father. And so that can have an impact on ultimately down the road your relationship with God. And some men may have had a father in the home who necessarily wasn't a believer or was lukewarm or didn't walk with God, so that can impact your relationship with God. And so so we want to just talk about manhood today, just because we know that is the crux of what we do at B.R.U.H, and we want to touch and bless God's lives. And so we just want to drop it into 5 things. We want to break down the 5 things that God says about being a man. And so just for starters, I'm gonna touch to you two. And I forgot to reintroduce myself. I'm Andre Toran, brothers.
Andre,
and your host. But to open up the floor, fellas, I just want to start off for y'all. What does it mean to be a man? From the worlds that you were raised in, from what you were taught, and what might be some stories on how you tried to accomplish that? And when do you, and when did you think you officially reached manhood?
I'll jump in there first. So I've had an array of, I want to say, good examples and bad examples in my life. So I was blessed and fortunate enough to be raised with a father. I had a Christian father in my life. I'm a PK, so my dad's a preacher, and my dad, we come from like a Baptist church background. And my dad didn't play when it came to the word of God. He didn't play when it came to like respect and leadership and stuff. So from him, I learned that a man is a person who is a leader, who loves God, God-fearing man, first and foremost, looks to him for wisdom and directions, and who is a leader and was respectable, who treated women with respect. Like, I had to take out the trash in the house. Like my dad it was expectation that you taking this trash is taken out by you. Don't let me see your mom trying to take the trash out. If your mom tell you to do something, you do it. So I had that in the home, but then I had a few examples like from friends. I had an uncle who was incarcerated, and his definition, like he wasn't a Christian at all, but his definition of a man was how many girls you dating. So every time I would get on the phone with him, he would call from prison, and everybody had their time to talk to him on the phone. And so when it was my time, the first question he asked me is, "How many girls you got?" And so I was like, and I would lie. I was like, "Yeah, I got a girlfriend." You just got one girlfriend? I was like, "No, I got a few who are interested, but I'm just talking to one." So, from the way he, I had my father's acceptance and love, but I did seek it from other men too. And so for my uncle, I was like, I gotta impress him because I want him to be proud of me. So when I would say I got 2 or 3, he's like, "You got 2 or 3? That's good. Well, how old are you?" I'm like, "I'm 11. I'm 11. I got 2 or 3." So all of us lying. Give my cousin the phone. He like, "I got 5." I'm like, "You ain't got no 5 girlfriends, boy." And none of us had any, but it was just different interpretations of like what manhood was in school. It was like, far as sports, like who was the biggest, who physicality, and athlete, who was the most athletic,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So all these things in my head, these good examples, bad examples, and filtering that through my little 12-year-old brain to find out like what is a man really. I found that in, I think, approval from other men. I was a Christian at 9 years old, but I wasn't even seeking that from what a godly standpoint. At that point, I was just looking to other men, and if they got excited about something, like if you were good at football or basketball, or if they were like giving you praise, I just thought I'm doing the right thing. I just saw that from them. So
for sure. Neil, you wanna expand a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm sitting here listening to Corey and just thinking about our upbringing, and we're like, we have two different lifestyles. However, in essence of what we see today, when we talk about community, fatherhood, godly men, it just made me think back to my childhood in essence of when did I find out about a man, becoming a man, or if I even knew what a man was then, in essence of the surroundings and what I was taught. So, of course, I grew up in a household with both parents, but we wasn't a heavily religious or follower of the word. Let's say the word. We went to church, but we weren't followers of the word necessarily, right? But a foundation was set. And I think about how in a family where we were big on loving each other and being connected in that sense. And now how I saw my father lead the household in essence of what a man should do in taking care of the family. That's something that I began to find my comfort in and knowing that they kept us safe, we were secure, and we was innate. And this is the part when I talked about community, having that as my foundation in my home. Well, we're not heavily religious, but we are Christians, and we try to live by the standards in some capacity, right? So being that that's the foundational piece in my home, the community that surrounded us was a very Christian community, right? And we had churches on every corner. I'm from a small town in South Georgia, so every church on the corner was Christian. Like that's what, we did in terms of I sung in the choir and I attended church every Sunday. I was even traveling during the week with the church, but following the principles or leading by discipleship in my church wasn't something that I knew of. So I was just going to church because it was a community thing. Yeah. But I wasn't necessarily going to church because I was really being filled with the word of God. But I was doing as a youth what I should do to keep myself at least on that path. And going to church and finding something that I enjoyed most, which was singing in the choir, at church. So that kind of, along with the stability at home, and in a community where it's Christian based, and then doing what, kids would normally do and going to church, participating in activities, but not yet matured in a way where they can receive the word. So that was me as a youth. But then as I began to grow and become, a man myself, I began to continue to walk by values that was established because family values were established. Community was established. So in essence, I stayed connected to that in spirit. And I think there were some values that kept me on the right path. But when I began to step outside of that, because remember, I wasn't living by necessarily the word, but I was following and doing what I should do as a youth. But when I began to step outside of that and I became an adult, some of those practices that I didn't hold to heart as a youth didn't follow me, because then I began to lose sight because I was out of my own. And then I was introduced to the world. So in essence of that, that's when the foundation got a little shaky and I began to step out on my own. If I don't have those principles that I was hearing but wasn't living by, right, that I will, just go in life and just experience what it's about. And so that's when, and get to the point, to the question, thinking back to how I didn't become a man until I truly became a follower of Christ. And when I say a follower of Christ, meaning I began to truly abide in him, right? In light of my struggle, in light of the things that I had experienced, thinking that, I'm a follower of Christ, or I'm a Christian, yet I'm a Christian, but not walking by Christian values, right? Standards. And it wasn't until I finally got to a point after going through seasons of not following God's way that I began to follow Christ, is when I began to understand what a kingdom man or being a man of God really represents. And that didn't happen until later on in my 30s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now to come back around as we're having this discussion to talk about what it means to be a man, or do we really think we are men in essence of how we're walking day to day in our choices? It just made me think back to my childhood and how everything matters in terms of from the home and how it's structured to how you are, to what community you are surrounding yourself in, and to how you are walking by certain values really determine how we are to lead our lives as men of God.
And Neil, that's extremely important, because if men are not in the household, or if they're in the household and are not men of God, then that foundation isn't properly laid. So I love my dad to death. He's like the person I look up probably to the most in my life. Wonderful provider, a fearless and relentless father and provider. Like that drives him to be able to say that he can provide for his family. But when it comes to like the spiritual side, he's kind of lukewarm. I mean, he believes in the Lord, but he's not necessarily walking as hard as a man might be called to walk. And I don't think he has an issue with me sharing that. He might acknowledge that himself. But a lot of times we get wrapped up in, as men, that, hey, as a man, we get taught I'm supposed to be a provider, right? But we only equate those to two areas of provision. We equate that to financial provision and like physical protection usually. But no one is talking about how as a man and how as a father and how as a leader of your household that you're supposed to be the spiritual leader and proprietor of that home as well.
Right.
Like you're supposed to be asking yourself, okay, well, how is my family doing emotionally, mentally, and physically? I'm not physically and spiritually. Okay, some people might have how's my family doing emotionally? Okay, how's my family doing mentally? Maybe. But the spiritual we kick out. We as men, a lot of times we don't do that. And that's why you see women so heavily. I mean, that's why there's so many situations where I could go to church. And this was a reality of my own, where I would see women with their kids, but there was no man. And that didn't mean because that woman didn't have a husband, he just won't come to church. So how do you set the foundation for the next line of kids?
Yeah, that's a great point, Andre, because you actually just tied in the whole point I was trying to make when I went through my old first part of talking about what it means to be a man in my childhood. You actually just got to the point that I was trying to make in what was missing then, although I was in church. And to your point of, like I say, my father, he was a Christian, but it wasn't as if in the home or even in the community, there were men that was leading in a way where, like we're seeing today, where, we're being discipled or we're being led, or we see many opportunities or men that's stepping up, that's wanting to be leaders in the faith, right? Then it wasn't the spiritual element that I needed as a child, the principles or the leadership or let's say mentoring that is so essential when talking about leading or leading by example, such that because you can't expect this, that in the household, the father, right, who's the leader, who's providing things financially, who's making sure that they have food on the table, and they don't go without. Yet what's missing a lot of times, like you were speaking of, is the spiritual component, right? That's embedded in the foundation. And that if that spiritual principle, which is, led by our faith and our belief, and that's keeping us on a stable ground, such that if it's being led by those spiritual principles, then every other aspect in terms of the growth of the family, right, can begin to take root or bear more fruit in essence of being on that firm foundation. So that's what I think as a youth for me was lacking. And that's why when I began to step out on my own, having not been led in a way spiritually to keep myself on that right track as I move on in life, that if it wasn't in the foundation, then you're going to find it somehow along the way as a Christian.
Yeah.
Some of those things that you're gonna begin to see in the world that doesn't align with what was in you in spirit then, but yet you may not have been a follower of it, but it was in you. Yet when you begin to step out in the world and you begin to face a lot of the trials and the struggles and all the temptation that comes along with it, because we're not on that foundation firmly, and we're not carrying through with those values throughout life, you begin to come a little shaken, and then you lose sight of God being there for you and being able to comfort you and get you through those moments. So that's why we as a people, we sometimes get caught out in the world and we lose sight of our values, our standards.
And with that being said, let's go to the word on it then. You know, we try to look at the world, but let's see what the word says about that. So our focus verse within this, the rest of this not session, but this podcast episode is 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14. And it says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. Within that verse, you get 5 things as a man that you are supposed to do. 5 things. And Corey, I know we talked about this in the planning stages of the pod, and you expounded upon this. Can you just talk about, before we go into the 5 and we kind of get close to time for this session, can you talk about how this was Paul's final address to men and why that was important?
Yeah, Paul was basically, this is his epistle, his letter, his first letter to the Corinthians church. And what was going on, there was a lot of selfishness, man. A lot of men were thinking about themselves, and it's not that different from our time, man. A lot of them were just very, very arrogant, self-seeking. And Paul knew that men in the church is important. God calls us to be servant leaders. God has given us responsibility, just like Adam had responsibility. And so what he was saying, he was affirming them, because in the ESV version, my version, he's saying, be watchful, stand firm, act like men. And so he's saying that, like, this is what men do, so if you don't know, and he's given to you, he's like, hey, here's a hint. This is what men should do. And this is what they should exude in the church. We are protectors, so be watchful. So he's giving those things. So Paul, Paul don't hold no punches, man. He gives it to him straight. No chaser. So he's exhorting men, and I think that's so applicable in our time. So that's what we're doing. What we're doing.
For sure. Let's go ahead and get to these 5 things. Let's get to these 5 things. And if we don't get to all 5, we're gonna come back and give y'all the rest of them. All right, is that good with y'all?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with number 1. I'm gonna take this one. Neil, go. You're gonna take 2, and I'll let Corey get the 3, and then we'll see what happens. All right. Okay. So let's run through all 5 real quick. So number 1, be on guard or be alert. Number 2, stand firm in the faith. And again, these are 5 things that God says about being a man, according to 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14. Yeah. So we got 1, be on guard. 2, stand firm in the faith. 3, be courageous, or as I think Neil put it, grow up. 4, be strong. And 5, do everything in love. So I'm gonna start with number 1, be on guard. 1 Timothy 6, 11 tells us, it says, but you are a man of God, so run from all these things, pursue righteousness and a godly life, along with faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness. Being on guard is what, man, we're naturally created to do this. We're naturally created. Especially as Black men. And this might just be a product of growing up Black, but we're always naturally kind of skeptical. So being on guard isn't something that should be unusual to you, but it's about what you're guarding that what matters. So are you protecting your heart? Are you protecting the hearts of your loved ones? Are you feeding yourself? Because being on guard is also a proactive thing. You don't set up camp in an area to guard something without doing recon. You don't do it without doing some reconnaissance. So if you're trying to guard your heart, are you reconning the areas that you're putting your life in spiritually? And then protecting it and being able to study your enemy or study what attack is coming. So being on guard and being alert is active, even though you're playing defense. Mm-hmm. And then the final point I want to make, because I want to kind of get through these, is to be aware who you're endangering if you are not on guard.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is when men fall and men make mistakes and they're not on guard, they'll feel the consequences, but the brunt of their consequences falls on your wife, your kids, and your family as a whole. So when men screw up and men fall short, men feel some of it, but the majority of who is feeling that are the people that you're supposed to be protecting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm gonna leave it right there. So let's move on to number 2. Neil, what we got for number 2, bro?
Standing firm, bro. We kind of talked about this leading into it, standing firm in the faith, and that goes back to as it talks here in Matthew 7:24-27, it talks about 2 foundations. And what is being illustrated here is standing firm, or when you're building a house on a solid foundation, then that foundation is built on values, principles, things you must abide by, rules, regulations, guidelines, things that you establish for your household, such that that household remains firm and it stands steady, such that when you go through storm seasons or you experience those rocky moments, that house is going to remain firm. So nothing can't come. Wind can't come through and knock that house off its foundation.
Yeah.
In this verse, if we think about our lives, right, if we're walking and standing firm in our faith, walking by faith at that, and if we are building on those principles and values that God has instilled in us by us continuing to seek first the kingdom of God and allowing him to continue to not only plant seeds in our lives, such that he gives us more tools and resources to water and even plant even more so he can grow more of his goodness in our lives on the foundation that he's established for us, right? If we're building up on that, then we'll go on and we won't stumble, right? We stay firm in that. So, and when we experience the enemy, or we experience temptation, things try to come through and knock us off that foundation, God, who is our light source, right, will continue to remind us of his goodness and then remind us how powerful we are in our weakness in that moment. We've talked about that many a times, that God's power is perfected in weakness. So that's when, if we're rocky on that foundation at any point, right, or if we feel a little bit slighted, or we feel the enemy is trying to get in, God, by being our strong tower, will keep us firm. So this is the point, though, getting into the last point of why it's important to stand firm. God will then, as he's causing us to grow in his light, will give us fruit in that home, right, for us to eat, for us to use up, right? And so we can go out and help others and give back, and we all can continue to grow and stand firm in the faith. So it's more to us just building on a solid foundation. It's more of what God is trying to do in our lives so we can go out and help our other brothers and sisters to also build up on that same firm foundation. 100%. So yeah. All right, Corey, number 3.
When I think about being courageous, I was just thinking as you guys were talking, and this is good stuff, y'all. It takes courage to live differently. 100%. It takes courage to go to swim. You know, you talk about the fish, the swimming against, going the other direction. And that's what we have. That's what we need as men. We need courage, man. And it takes courage to be vulnerable, because we as men are so used to, we don't want to show any weakness. But as a kingdom man, that's what we have to realize. When we first come to Christ, we're saying, I can't save myself. I need you, Jesus. And so it's okay to be dependent if you're dependent upon God, because we all need him. So we got to be courageous enough to live differently in our time. Like everybody's on this wave. You got to be okay and courageous enough to say, I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to ride Jesus's wave. I'm not going to ride this wave, because it takes courage to be unpopular. It takes courage these days, man. It takes courage to really believe God's word. And that's even for Christian men, the strongest Christian men. It takes courage to believe God and take God at his word. You read in the Bible, you read in the Gospels, Jesus is always telling the disciples, did I not say it was so? Did you guys, in essence, he's like, do you not believe what I say is true? You know, do you not believe my word? And so it takes courage when God is giving us certain affirmations, like when he says, flee youthful lusts, these things that are going to hurt you, right? Do you believe God's word? Do you believe his commands? Is it better to wait to have sex until I get married? Like, is it better? Is what God's saying is true? Take him at his word. There's a scripture that we were talking about, 1 Peter 2 verses 2. And this is the NLT version. It says, like newborn babes, you must crave pure spiritual milk so that you will grow into full experience of salvation. And so we want to cry out for nourishment, man. We have to cry out to God. And he's given us his instruction book. That's the playbook. If you guys played football before, I played football when I was little out in the street. I never played organized football. I played baseball and basketball, but that's another note. But there's a playbook, right? When you play football, there's a playbook. This is how things are going to go. The Bible is our playbook, and it tells you, and if you don't follow the playbook, you're going to get caught slipping. All right. None of us are perfect. We need Jesus. We need courage to trust God. We need the courage to trust that God's word is true and that he loves us and that he can show us how to be real men. I'm done with the courage.
For sure. So back to me. Number 4 is be strong. We're gonna fit these in here.
Let's do it.
Y'all gonna get this work. Be strong, man. As men, like we naturally think being strong is in a physical way. I know, Corey, you talked about showing off athletically and doing different things, but strength is in self-control. Strength is in vulnerability. Strength is in surrendering. And you know, real men, I know this is something I want to touch on, have a routine. You find strength in routine. You find strength in being repetitive. Are you in your word daily? Are you growing there? Are you establishing healthy habits? Have you identified what your unhealthy habits are? And then as you begin to attack those and break those down, are you replacing what is now empty with something that is healthy that will help you to grow? Are you being real with where you are? It's easy to say, well, it's not easy to say you have an issue, but once you announce that you have an issue in the area, that becomes easier to say out your mouth. But what are your actions doing to follow? These things are no different than what we profess as doing things in the world. When we have an issue with something that is going on with us as a man in the world, it always comes down to, well, are you manning up and doing something about it? Well, how is your walk with God and really stepping into true masculinity any different? Right. Are you asking yourselves that question? We talk and not make jokes, but we soften the idea of journaling and writing how we feel and the idea of self-inventory and tag that as a female characteristic. When that is the most toxic thing we can do, we need to be sitting down and journaling and taking inventory and doing these things, because a real man is strong enough to say, hey, I know I can be vulnerable here with the correct people and even with myself, because the more I make this soil soft, the more I can plant seeds that actually grow something up in my life that produces fruit. Because if you're not producing fruit, you're not producing nothing. And God didn't place you on this earth to be useless. He placed you on this earth to be a vessel to carry his glory onto glory and to reflect glory and to change from glory to glory. So don't get me started about what it means to be strong as a man. I get up under the bench right now and put 225 up 10 times for me if you want me to at 5'8", 185. I can do that for you if you want me to. But I know what? I can also tote this Bible and smack you across the head with it. And try to get my life in order so I can step into the position as a man that is necessary to carry on to the next generation, so I can provide for my family, so I can provide to a future wife, so I can sow seeds and have seed that have something that can take generationally. We want to talk about generational wealth, but we don't want to talk about generational curses.
Come on now.
So, Neal, I'll let you bring it home, brother. I'm sorry. You know how I get going, man.
I know how you go, bro. I'm just, bro, I'm ready to pass around the plate, bro. Man. Good one, bro. This next one, man, is we hear this word love all the time, right? But living by what it truly means to do everything in love is so missing in our community. And see, I had to learn that the hard way myself, because God talks about or it mentions in the Bible about you should love God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul, and all of your strength, right? Yeah. Do everything in love. He calls us to love our neighbor, right? He calls us to love each other in essence of he loved us first. Right. So doing everything in love, it stems back to that word foundation. It sticks with me. I think that's the thing that's a principle I live by, foundation, because it keeps me in line with what God calls us to do, what he commands and instructs his people to do, right? And one of the first commandment, the be all of all is what I call it, is to love one another, right? So that's why this do everything in love is so important. That's why just that 4-letter word is so important. And if we were to give more love, right, as men, right, and this is a verse that I want to just read in essence of love that is one of the most probably spoken words that's from the Bible as it relates to love, where it says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it does not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs, right? And so that verse is so powerful in essence of, as men, if we're able to have a posture, right? A posture of what it truly means to love, a posture of what it truly means to be kind and be generous to your fellow man, to everyone that's before us, because we've been called, right? Yeah. As leaders, right? If God has called us as leaders in the household to be able to provide and to carry on the spiritual nurturing that needs to take place as the head of household, right? God expects that we will carry a heart of love, a love that's from a biblical perspective, an agape perspective, such that we keep our minds set on what God says and what it means to go out and love one another, right? And so we're spreading that sort of goodness that God has planted in our hearts within our homes, and then we're carrying that through all our community, and we're giving that back and releasing that from the grace that God has in us to be able to speak that into the hearts and the minds of others. Then we all as a people can grow together. So a call for men is to step up and love more. That's why we should do everything in love. That's why we should do everything in love, based on the foundation that God has set for us, that he promised to us a long time ago.
For sure.
So
for sure.
That's why if we do everything in love and seek God in the process, he'll continue to nurture us as men such that we'll be able to do what he's called us to do as leaders.
Yeah. That's all that's all we got for you. It's simple. It's 5 things, baby. It's 5 things. Be on guard.
Yeah.
Be on guard. Be alert. 2, stand firm in your faith. 3, be courageous. Grow up. You want to talk about being a man, be a man. Grow up. Let's be courageous out here. 4, be strong. And 5, do everything in love, man. And right here, bro, man, we just want to let y'all know, fellas, and whoever else is tuning in, that we love y'all and that we do this for community. We do this for accountability, and we're doing this to change the world. We're doing this so men can take back the place that they're supposed to take as leaders in the household, as leaders in the community, and not off of like a hierarchy thing, but what off the word tells us and calls us to do, and to address some of the areas that we're failing. And so we want to thank you for tuning into the second episode of the Brothers Rising Uphill podcast. You can find us on Anchor, which will take you to anywhere that podcasts are streamed, readily available, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to wherever else you get your podcast. Make sure you share it with a friend. Let's get this ball rolling, and let's really do some work. So thank you again for tuning in to Bruh. So You Think You're a Man, 5 things God says about being a man. And we love you, and we thank you, and we hope to see you next time. All right, y'all. Peace.